hi everybody. Welcome to session 11. We're talking about a whole school approach to careers ed, and what more specifically, not what it is, but what are the benefits, and really getting into what those barriers are and what some of those solutions are around a debate. I will just share. We have with us on the panel Professor Jim Bright, as always.
Hello.
To drive provocations and discussion. I've already been told off for my misuse of English language today. And Grace Kinch, from Director of Curriculum at Korowa Anglican School. Thanks for joining us.
And Thank you, my pleasure.
You've been around a few weeks in these sessions now, haven't you? You've been to quite a few of them now, so
yes,
familiar face. And it's really good that as we get to know the community more, we can see what angles and interests and insights people can bring to these sessions. So as always, if you've got something that you'd like to share, put your hand up and let us share. Not that you put your hand up, Grace. I tapped her on the shoulder earlier because of curriculum and a careers background. So really interesting mix. So great to have you here and looking forward to diving into this.
Thank you.
The first thing I want to do before we dive in is just look at get a quick read from people, if you open the chat, on what do you think about a whole school approach and what does it mean to you? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to, what do you think it would look like? If I can find my chat button, I think it's gone.
I'm sorry, I can't find the chat.
Have you got a little black panel down at the bottom anywhere?
I certainly do. It's just blank for me, the chat.
Well, you can tell us.
What does a whole school approach look like?
Yeah, for you. Yeah, what does it mean?
I feel that all staff members will be comfortable in the delivery of careers education, in the sense that they're empowering children of all ages. So it depends on what kind of school that we're in. I know that for myself, I'm in a P to 12 school. And much like, I guess, how teachers perceive, or there's that perception that all teachers should be teachers of literacy and numeracy. And I'm a big believer that we should do the same for careers education. I believe all teachers have the ability to deliver careers education as well as pastoral care. My apologies, I jumped in late. I was just on a phone call too.
Oh, okay, we've got people arriving all the time. There's lots going on, we know. Yeah, that's really nice that it's kind of that general team responsibility. It's everybody's job.
Mm-hmm.
And a reply from the range of stakeholders participating in developing the whole person. Yes, absolutely, that holistic approach. Careers is not a silo, it's not a separate thing, a natural part of everyday teaching. And Rowena's saying, yeah, students be more ready to face what comes next after school. I think that's it. And for me, on a very practical level, it's probably the only way that we can get evidence into practice at scale when careers is under-resourced. There's not many schools where you could actually have that early, often integrated approach within the existing resources they've got. Grace, you said last week on another call when we talked about whole school approach, you said whole school approach is utopia for careers education. And I love that. And I was just like, that's exactly what I think. So we'll give you that as a starting point. But before we dive in, can you give us a bit of a background on you and your role and your program at the school?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Yes, my role is Director of Curriculum. I work in an all-girls school in lockdown Melbourne, Victoria. It's a early learning centre to Year 12 girls' school, and I've been there for quite a while. Although as a Director of Curriculum, obviously I have a lot of those overall curriculum responsibilities that you could imagine, I do have a careers education background and have spent many years as that frontline careers counsellor. And the move into curriculum was an interesting one for me at the time. An opportunity came up. So the school I was in, I was the careers education counsellor, but also had responsibility for the Victorian Certificate of Education and implementation, because it would seem to be aligned in a sense. So one of my passions was always this idea that really careers is not a separate thing. Careers is an integral part of everyday education for young people, because we do know as toddlers they start to role play. I still have vivid memories of my own son and his role playing careers and what he may or may not do when he grew up. And I think it's a conversation that we as educators need to be involved in from a very early stage. So in the role of Director of Curriculum, I do have the actual face-to-face careers counsellor report to me, which is advantageous in a way, because it means I still am very hands-on with careers education, and I've always said I'd never want to sort of move away from that. However, even with that background, within my own school, I still struggle to sort of get this whole school approach, but I think since I've discovered Become Education, or Become Me, I should say, it's given me a whole new perspective, and I now feel that definitely with the times we're living in, with so much uncertainty, that the time is ripe for us as careers counsellors to really make the most of this opportunity to convince our school leadership teams that this is the right thing to do.
Great, and I think, thanks for the plug, but I also think there is a real momentum around it. I really feel, you know, we had this session last week, which was about the whole school approach to education and how Become specifically can help. And we've been inundated with people just going, yes, 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 and principals following up. And I saw a comment from a few people on Twitter recently, like, we can't do without this any longer. It really feels, and you know, we've got the Looking to the Future report, whatever happens from that, it's out in the public domain and, you know, pulled out separately to the general capabilities. So it feels to me like there's a big momentum and a growing awareness and understanding among principals. And I think that's been one of the big challenges as we go. So talk us through your program as it stands.
Sure. Wearing the hat of Director of Curriculum, I have managed to have some influence in terms of embedding some careers education programs within the school. So our focus has been working with Year 9 students. So previously it was in a program which I call iFocus, taking on board the I terminology at the time, where we developed a program which was delivered by me within the teaching allotment that I was expected to have, a program based on obviously career education guidelines and, you know, the blueprint for career development. So we very much focused on this whole picture of self-awareness. And I developed the program using 3 mantras, and one of which, Liv, I know you use, and that is, one of them is, the best project you'll ever work on is you. You can't be what you can't see. So they're my 2 main mantras, and the program is based on that. So we focused on self-awareness as the umbrella terminology, and through that we explored values, skills, 21st century skills. How do I get these skills? Which is an element of the program which really encourages them to explore everything they do, including their co-curricular and hobbies, and what it is they're actually learning apart from being in a rowing team, for example. So we really unpack that with each individual student so that they can see the link between being in a rowing team and developing teamwork skills, collaboration, persistence, that sort of thing. We do some appropriately geared careers testing at that age, but we really use it as an opportunity to unpack, in particular, what is it saying about you and who you are? Not the careers bit in the first instance. I really like to leave that to last, but how do you better understand yourself through doing this and what is some of the vocabulary or language you can use to start describing yourself. And there's a great sense of satisfaction when you have a student say, "It's really me. I can see that's me in that report." So that's great. So they're now starting to understand, in a sense, a little bit more about who they are. We unpacked the careers thing. I mean, as careers counsellors, you know what you do with all of those particular tests. And we try to look at it as this is where I bring in the mantra of you can't be what you can't see. A bit like don't judge a book by its cover, don't throw things out just because you don't like the sound of that. What is it really about? So we do some work, obviously, in that area. And we try to, build it into this project of how they can then use this information to help them in their life. So the testing we use has a section on how do I make a difference with the sort of traits that are part of me. And because at our school at Year 9, they're involved in quite a lot of programs such as a House Arts, where they're the leaders. They participate in some outdoor education stuff where how they function in a group is really important. So understanding a little more about themselves in that regard really helps. So we try to link it to everything they're going to do in Year 9. From there, in Year 10, we take it to the next step where they do the Moresby testing, and we do try to link it back to what they did in Year 9. So they're probably our 2 key years, and through that work, that then helps their one-on-one interviews, of course, with the careers counsellor. I think I'll stop there.
No, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah. So I think probably a lot of what people are hearing are things that you think, oh yeah, I do that too. One of the big differences though this year was, up until now, it's been me, in a sense, delivering the Year 9 program to every Year 9 student across the year. And then at Year 10, joined by obviously the day-to-day careers counsellor. But we made some changes at Year 9 this year, and we implemented a program across the school that comes out of Expedition Learning, which is out of the UK, and we implemented CREW. Now, CREW then had this opportunity to add in teachers. So now the work that I was doing under iFocus through my training, and I suppose leadership in this area, is being delivered by a wider team. And now the wider team are seeing the benefits of this work. The changes they're seeing in certain students around this greater level of self-awareness, which they haven't been able to see in other ways. So I think that's been the best thing this year. And so in working with Liv, I'm trying to see, okay, let's see what we can do now with something like Become Me, because we can get other teachers, say, delivering this in the equivalent CREW at other year levels as well.
Yeah, and it's I haven't read the book yet, but it's the new book from EL Education, isn't it? Is it called We Are CREW or just CREW?
Yeah, We Are CREW, but we call it CREW.
Yeah. Have you got hold of it yet? I think it's only just arrived in Australia, hasn't it?
No, I haven't. No.
For anybody interested, it's a really good approach to that challenge of whole team engagement, whole team responsibility. So if anyone is embracing that whole EL Education CREW idea, then it would smooth the path to many of these things, wouldn't it?
Yep.
In terms of that holistic approach to the individual, as well as that team approach to what's important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, coming back to your quote about careers education utopia, why would a whole school approach be utopia?
Well, it would be utopia, I think, because we need to capture our future generations from that moment. They're talking about, they're role playing, they're playing with their dolls or they're playing with whatever. And they start to talk, as we all know. When I grow up, I want to be a fireman. When I grow up, I want to be, it's typically those sorts of things. But how do we capture those experiences? And even if they are, let's just say, even prep, how do we engage them in conversations about that, and how do we make the most of it? So I really feel it would be the utopia, because I don't think we can let those opportunities go by the by when they are happening naturally in life. And I think this is what would be the utopia. I mean, ideally, it probably shouldn't even be called careers education, because it should just be a normal part of life. This is why we could get philosophical and say, why do we have children? Obviously, we have children because we want to build the world's population. We want our own children to love, but we want them to be happy, successful adults and have a fabulous life, do the best they can, etc., make a difference, all of that. And so it's not a separate conversation. And I suppose my experience shows me the reason why and also then it's that linking all of that to self-awareness. I mean, you can have these conversations with preps or grade 2 children or grade 3 children, because too often I see when you have the year 12 student who's sitting there having that, we have VTAC, Victorian Tertiary Admission Centre in Victoria, like the New South Wales UAC. I've got no idea what course interests me. I've got no idea no idea. And when you sit in on those, I honestly think they are young people who've have very little self-awareness. They've just not had that opportunity. They've missed out somehow. We haven't done enough in our programs to encourage them. And yes, obviously there's parental responsibilities in all of this, but not all of our students may have that sort of background that allows that sort of conversation to happen. So this is why, to me, that self-awareness and that opportunity to explore and say yes, no, oh, that sounds interesting, oh, that sounds really like me, is just so vital. And the more opportunity they have within their curriculum, their normal school life, I think the better.
Yeah, I think what you just said around the being there at the moments of inspiration and teaching them to recognize that moment of inspiration, rather than imposing a process that says your moment of inspiration will happen in this 15 minutes, actually teaching them to how to engage with their own curiosity and how to even think about it. There was a great report came out of the Behavioural Insights team in the UK around, I think it was called Moments of Choice. Jim, was it? Jim?
It was.
And it talked about moving from moments of information, which is kind of the traditional, to moments of inspiration, which is much more student-centered and meet them where they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I didn't particularly like the language around moments of choice, because it does seem to imply that there's a point where you have to sort of make a very key decision. I always prefer to think in terms of process. So when it comes to things like self-awareness, I don't particularly have a problem with somebody saying, I don't know. But what I really want them, by the time they're sort of in senior school, is I don't know, but I know how to know. And I think that is, in a sense really important. I think the emphasis on knowing yourself is a really dangerous one, because no one can.
True.
and it can lead to rather fixed thinking. And you end up with that sort of, with my English background, I'd say Yorkshireman type approach of, I know what I like and I like what I know, and my mind is closed to any new ideas. And you see that with kids, don't you? Sometimes you say, yeah, I am going to play AFL and that's it. I'm not going to listen to you, irrespective of any feedback I get about my talent. I'm not listening. That's what I want to do. And it's that sort of closed, rigid mindset. And I think, what you're identifying there, Grace, is that idea of capturing it as they are ready for it and then developing those skills. And of course, what happens with that is what emerges from that process is self-insight. So you get to it. So the self-insight doesn't become the goal, but the self-insight becomes the emergent sort of knowledge from all of this activity and this development of skill. And I think that's what happens with high-functioning adults is, they know how to pursue their interest. They know how to do something about their curiosity. So, they'll see something and they won't just say, oh, that's something, and move on. Sort of goldfish, go around the bowl and back, oh, there's something, move on. But rather they know how to, okay, yeah, I want to explore that. Or I've been down that alley before. That's a dead end. It's probably not worth putting my energies into. I'm going to put it over here, or I'm going to wait a little while. And it's those sorts of strategic skills which I think are really important to help us. And sometimes in terms of self-development, we can literally, it can be decades of focusing on perhaps, the purely academic. and not ever thinking about, I don't know, sort of physical things to do with, you know, your body and how your brain connects to it, and what implications that may have. And you see that, say, in tradespeople who suddenly get to a stage in life where their bodies are giving up on them, and they can't continue in their particular career. Also, I see it a lot in my medical legal work with people who've been injured at any age, from young people to more senior people. But it's that ability to adapt, that ability to learn, that ability to find out that information when they want to, and having systems, that whole school approach system, modeling that idea of being able to pursue those things when the person is ready for it, rather than having it simply everybody go through the sheep sort of dip.
Mm.
I think is a really promising notion.
And do you think that's being able to do it in that lower stakes when those big decisions aren't looming? You know, Grace, you talk about like that sitting in that year 12 and it's, I don't know, it's high pressure, high stakes decisions. Having done it and practiced it and practiced those explorations when it's low stakes, you know, from year 5, year 4, all the way through, and as they get more solid about their ideas, year 8, 9, do you think that would help them in year 12, or are we always going to get to that horrible, oh my God, this is really stressful, I don't have a clue?
I think definitely, I think it would help them, because I think it would give them the confidence to think, well, I have done some thinking on this, or I've explored this, and at the moment, although I might not be happy with anything I've seen or felt or whatever, at least they've got some experience behind them. And I think they're in a better position in year 12 to actually articulate why they think they don't know.
Yeah.
I think I was just thinking, when you're saying that, I was thinking of a situation like, you know, many of us will have confronted like a mathematics exam where you look at the paper and you think it must be in Latin. You've got absolutely no idea. So you have that sense of uncertainty. But the more you go through that process, and the more you think, well, actually, I've been taught these strategies for breaking it down, and I can try things. And then I've been in this situation before and I've got through it. And these are the sorts of things I can do. Like the way we teach exam strategy, you know, read the whole paper, time yourself, you know, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. I think those skills, and I think teaching, and I know a lot of people find this difficult, but actually encouraging kids into situations of uncertainty, not certainty, but quite the opposite, uncertainty, in a structured, supportive way, and then ramping that up over the years as they have more resilience and more skills, and they've developed more social support, I think is a very, very important form of career development. Because, you know, when as Liv says, they reach that moment of, oh my God, this is uncertain, they can deal with it. Anyone who's lost a job, it can be catastrophic. Someone who's lost jobs regularly, assuming it's not their fault and there's not a pattern there, tend to, not always, but tend to sort of say, okay, I've been in this situation before, I can deal with it. You know, I see it with things like international students, or even with migrants. You know, they've made this big move, they've made this big sort of adaptation in their life, and that can develop significant levels of self-efficacy. And we don't do that enough in terms of career stuff. We just sort of let them puddle along, and then suddenly hit them with, you've got to make a decision. This is going to affect the whole of your life. It's going to have huge financial repercussions. It may affect your relationship with your parents forevermore. So you better get it right. And it's not surprising that people stall in the face of that.
Yeah, they're very good points.
We had one a year 5 student or group of students just yesterday. They'd all done their timeline of, you know, everything they'd ever wanted to be since could they remember, or their parents could help them cast their minds back. And they actually just went, they had a bit of a light bulb moment, and I was there virtually, and they said, oh my God, there's a bit of a pattern here that most of us have changed our mind every 2 years since we were about 3. So, okay, so if we change our mind every 2 years, then we're probably going to change our mind another 4 times before we have to make the decision. And even that as an insight at year 5 to go, we're not aiming for this funnel, this answer. We're actually going to keep changing, and the world is going to keep changing. All right, how do we explore this next thing? And a much more open mindset. It was great. It was absolute gold to see that. You know, when you're like, yes, they've got it. a really good moment of insights for them.
Mm.
And the other things, I guess, you know, the evidence we have in terms of that time, the important time for not locking down the stereotypes, how it can actually help them put the reason into what they're learning right now and increase that engagement. You know, all the career development evidence is there to say we have to do it. Yet still in schools, it's not number one priority. It's very much, where does careers fit into education, rather than, okay, where does education fit into your career in life? So let's dive into the challenges. Like, I'm going to assume then for a second that everybody who's on this call is kind of like, yeah, we think it's the right direction to go. That would be utopia. What are the biggest challenges? And drop them in the chat while we hear Grace's big challenges. You know, you're director of curriculum. You think you can like clear the way, make it happen?
I think now, I think particularly, you know, how COVID has just, I think, forced us to have to, you know, pivot obviously so quickly. And those of us in Melbourne are in a very different situation to every other people. It's absolutely made me realise that I think our curriculum structures at the moment are just too overcrowded. I know the cliche, the overcrowded curriculum, but I honestly think we are asking our students to study too many subjects, you know, particularly in secondary school, chunking up their day into too many categories. And, you know, I don't think that's, you know, sort of real life in the end. So as a result, we're not really giving them the space to be in this space, which is, I think they do desperately want to be in. They want to think about their future. And I think this is the challenge now. Obviously, I would say, you know, having a primary/junior school where I work, you know, you can see that flexibility in their day. And so for me now, you know, a fabulous program like Become Me, which, you know, we are exploring, I think just would fit in beautifully there, because those teachers are working with the students as whole people all of the day. And, you know, I can, so long as there's someone there to say, here, this is going to help us achieve so much with our students' own personal development. And it's, you know, these are programs here ready to go, so to speak. The big challenge is the second years, obviously, because we have subject specialists, etc. And it's about how we bring on board our leadership team to say, you know, we're not expecting even more. It's about maybe doing, you know, less in that whatever we do now with our current timetables, and factoring this in and bringing your staff on board like that. And you know, I feel with any sort of careers education, you do make a difference to students' sense of even well-being, even though they're not ready to maybe take it on board yet or whatever. I do think there are changes. Like, I've seen students who have been going through sort of absenteeism stages, and I've even got one in my class this year at Year 9 Crew. Once she heard through the sort of the team chat, because she wasn't coming to any classes, she wasn't even coming to Crew, that we were moving more into this, I'll say, future space and looking at then, suddenly she's now in my class and she has done the coursework, done the work, done the careers test, and, you know, done the work booklet, and we're ready to have, I'm nearly up to her for our conversation, but she's been in every class since. And I thought, that's interesting.
Is that because it's for her?
Pardon?
Is that because it's down to that principle you had around the project, or the most compelling project is you?
You, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think now she's thinking maybe this could help me. So, yeah.
Okay.
I'll play the lead with
Devil's
the
advocate.
Of course, I'm born to the role. With my psychologist hat on, perched on top of my cynic's hat, people do what they're awarded to do. all right?
Mhm.
And and there's also a notion of social loafing. If you have a group and you share a responsibility, then people will socially loaf. In other words, they'll assume someone else is going to do it, and therefore they'll reason that therefore they don't have to do anything themselves.
Yep.
So, in a sense, what are we going to do to punish, possibly with capital punishment, teachers who don't engage properly with the career stuff? Secondly, we know as teachers and educators that if it's not marked, it doesn't get done. Homework which isn't marked isn't done and taken seriously. How do we build in performance metrics and demote and sack teachers who do not do their career work? He says with his tongue somewhat in his...
Go straight to stick.
Yeah. But you know, and then another one is this notion of, I suppose, change fatigue. That a teacher who sees themselves as remote from, I did not sign up. I remember my aunt, who was a teacher back in the 80s, retired with the view, I did not sign up to be a social worker. So she very much had that old school teaching.
Yep.
When she came through, that was not an expectation of the role, and she didn't welcome it and didn't think she was very good at it, and so forth. And that probably contributed to her retirement. There'll be many people in the schools who, for varying different reasons, will feel that they're not equipped to do the careers kind of role, and may possibly think, oh, here we go. This is another fad. It will pass. Therefore, I can keep my head down, won't get involved, and so forth. So I don't think this is particularly sort of specific to careers. I think this is any kind of change program or any kind of shared responsibility in an organization, in particular, in this case, a school. So there's that aspect. I mean, how do we actually get teachers? And yes, we can do all the sort of, you know, inspirational Sermon on the Mount and, you know, get everyone engaged and all that positive stuff. But unfortunately, as a psychologist once said to me, people are motivated by fear. And so forgetting all of that stuff about positive motivation and positive psychology, fear does motivate. I'm not trying to advocate for that, but I'm just saying that, you know, before we all get warm and gooey about the self-evident benefits of career development, not everyone thinks like us. Not everyone is giving up their time to be on a webinar like this. You know, we always get the engaged people. And as we know, not everyone is.
There is an audience that's full of fear.
Sorry?
There is an important stakeholder audience that is incredibly full of fear about this, and that's parents.
Yes.
And we're seeing increasingly schools come and say, oh, hold on, we've been selling, you know, high ATAR, pass to university, it's all good, give us your money and we'll secure that. And suddenly they're being questioned about, hold on, what else? What are you doing to prepare them properly for happiness and for fulfillment and all how to explore these paths? So that's where the stick will probably come from, and the actual the catalyst for real action and change may come from parent pressure and dollars.
And I suppose the other aspects of this, one of it is almost industrial in a way, but it's also professional, and that is, I mean, psychology has been through this since 1956, when a psychologist in America called George Miller said we should give psychology away. If I got up in front of a bunch of practitioners in Australia and said that, I wouldn't get out of the room alive. You know, is this tantamount to giving career development away? Do we lose our identity as we've barely got an identity as career practitioners. We've only had standards for 15 years.
Yeah.
Are we now about to say, well, actually, we're just going to dilute this and we can become relatively invisible? Or is it a hybrid model? Do we still have, and I've seen this in HR as well, you see devolved HR and then it all gets centralized again, you get central services, then it all gets devolved again. So there's always this tension in organizations going forward as to whether you do things locally and you give a small amount of training to practitioners, or whether you have a bunch of recognized experts with deep levels of knowledge, or whether you have both. So I just want to throw that up there. I'm not suggesting I have an answer to that, or it's necessarily a criticism either, for that matter. But I do think that could be an issue. Certainly, in New South Wales, where you've got this designated careers advisor position at the discretion of the principal, but most schools, as I understand it, have. I could imagine, and we brought in that, there was that thing, what were they called, a teaching assistant or something? There was another sort of pseudo career position that got developed in New South Wales state schools. Someone might be able to help out with that. Can't remember what it was called, but I remember there was some resistance about 10 years ago. There was some resistance to that. There was people thinking this is like a watering down. You know, I've gone through and got all my qualifications for what kind of attitude. So there's a sort of grab bag of sort of issues. I'm not saying there's no objections at all, but they're just sort of might have to be considered.
Well, I think that it relates to one of the barriers that's come up in the comments is obviously getting class teachers on board when they're, you know, overload anyway, admin overload, prep overload, and I think, you know, Grace touched on it. The really important for any program to, if you're going to try and use the teachers, that yes, we need to fire them up, and it needs to come from the top that this is really important, it has to be done, the expectation is that it will be a priority, but you don't have to do much work at all. And having those resources, really high quality resources ready to go. And making them, and someone else had said a lot of teachers feel fearful, and we've seen that a lot, like when they're kind of like, well, I don't know, there's so much talk about, you know, the future of work and, you know, what jobs will be in demand and that we're not keeping pace with the labour market. How can I advise people? And there's a misconception that they're going to be giving careers advice rather than teaching the skills.
Can I just pop in there while I was listening to Jim and then you, Liv. I really see COVID now as the absolute circuit breaker. The COVID normal, schools have to move into that space as well. Now, if we fundamentally look at parents, ultimately, whatever state you're in, they want their child to come out with, say, the best score possible, or the best, you know, let's just go best score possible for their means. So, which, when you unpack that, parents are actually saying so that they can get into the course or trade or apprenticeship, whatever, of their dreams or what they want to do. So in fact, that is first and foremost in parents' mind. They just don't articulate it that way. They simply say, what are you doing to get my child the best results?
Yes.
And then when you've got those uncertain students, you've also got, you know, if in a sense they've lacked any career exposure, or let's just say futures education, or even opportunities to focus on their repertoire of skills, when you've got the parent who is trying to tell the child, you need to do this or you need to do that course, etc., they then don't have the skills to be able to, in a sense, I'll just say negotiate with their parents around that. I mean, too often for us, we're dealing with, I'll say, distraught young people, young women who have parents who say expectation is that they'll move into this sort of field, when the child who's done their own self-awareness, know where they sort of stand on where their skills and talents are, want to go in a totally different area. And it's, how do I negotiate that minefield with my parents as well?
I think one of the answers to that is the Become Me Needs a Parent module. And that's not the parent module to help their children. It's the parent module to help themselves, get the self-interest going there. And COVID, again, will be a definite catalyst for that, because many of those parents who felt they had very secure careers, very sadly, will be facing the realities of uncertainty.
Correct.
So, you know, I don't know why Liv's still in the meeting. She should be out there finalising the parent version absolutely right now, because there'll be a demand for it. But I mean, I think if you get them on board like that, so they're sharing the same thing, sharing the same context. You know what it's like as teachers, that, you know, I don't understand the maths. That's not how I was taught how to do it. I can't help my child. And you get that disconnection. If you've got them speaking the same language and working in the same virtual environment and doing those explorations for themselves as much as for their children, I think that's one way of working around that kind of issue, I think.
And also having those conversations when it's not high pressure.
Yeah.
So if you're having those conversations with your 13-year-old about it's low stakes of, I'm thinking about architecture, I'm thinking about farming, you can actually learn. And if you've got the tools to have those great career conversations, and a school is telling the parents, this is our whole approach to careers education, our ideal parent is high support, low influence. We've got this. They are free to explore. This is our philosophy when it comes to careers. And they're having those productive conversations, and parents are informed and are valuable in those conversations when it's not high stakes. Then it does put that pressure on. I mean, we see a lot of experiments which have the killer question is one thing, but the secret killer question was, can I convince my parents? So there might be, does this have good prospects in the future? The actual personal question is, can I do something here that will convince my parents that this is an okay path to go down? Instead of, if I could be a doctor, I should be a doctor. You know, that every anti-radar again.
Liv, have we got an exercise yet for kids being their parents' careers advisor? Because I think we should. Seriously, seriously, I think we should.
No, it's really important, I think.
That the kids actually work and analyse and say, okay, let me give you careers advice. And they could do that from primary level onwards.
And do you know where it came from? Is because this mother in one of our sessions, they all came to the parent engagement session after they'd done their experiments and their Flipped Career Expo. And her mother stood up in front of all of these peers and parents, and she was bawling her eyes out, which I was bawling my eyes out as well. And she was just like, he has hated going to school every day for the last 3 years. And this morning we walked to school and he was like, Mum, why didn't you finish school? And she was like, oh, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't that good. And he turned around to her and said, that's all right. You're only like 40. There's loads of time and everyone keeps changing. And now you know what you want to do. And she said, I was just beside myself. So he was, and that was before we had the learning bit of then practicing it actively, that he'd taken all those and was giving that advice back. That's one of my highlights, actually. But I think, yes, taking away that high pressure of like, oh my God, your whole life depends on it, and having those practice conversations and scenarios earlier. And there's still the issue of parents who aren't engaged. But as you've talked about finding the time to effectively brief and educate parents, you can't do it in one hit, can you?
No.
So what are the other, I'm just scrolling through all the other challenges. So careers as a priority, and the teachers on board, I think we've talked about, let's make it as easy as possible. If it comes from the top and we find time and we have the resources, that's as good as we're going to get. Give them the confidence through PLM planning that they can do this and they don't have to have all the answers. Principals being the biggest hurdle. I'd love to hear an answer on this, but we've never seen, if a principal doesn't get it and prioritize it, we've never seen, I think, the blocker that we haven't managed to get over. Has anyone turned someone around completely? Silence. And I think that's kind of unanimous. Like if it's not on the strategy, it's not going to happen. But in positive news, I'm seeing more and more chat about it amongst principals and in principals forums and principals and DP conferences. There's a huge amount of pressure on them to be living up to that marketing that schools have got. We're preparing people for lifelong learning and 21st century careers. The question is being posed, like, how are you doing that? So
I told you my story about, I was going to say my worst keynote speech ever, but there's probably a long list of those, was when I was invited to speak at a principals conference in Australia. And I turned up to give this keynote on careers. And I'm not kidding. There was 4 principals in the room out of a enrollment of 600 at the conference or something like that. I thought, what the hell's gone on here? And then there was this awkward silence as I launched into my spiel. And then one of them said, well, I'm just looking for some advice about whether I should leave my school or not. Another one said, well, I'm here for my son. They completely failed to get. And it was pure self-interest. So 596 of them decided it was irrelevant. And the other 4 just wanted some direct advice either for themselves or their kids. That was... so I took the bottle of wine and off I went. But it was,
the thing that's coming up here more than anything is the curriculum challenge. And Grace, then what are the different ways people can cut it? Like we're seeing it we're seeing it increasingly in the Looking to the Future report. It was pulled out as one of the 4 essential skills, separate to the general capabilities. This isn't the same as the general capabilities. This is explicit skills to explore, design, and navigate your life. It was pulled out separately. We're all cheering, but it's not on any curriculum.
No.
To the level it should be.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of people talk about it and doing combined well-being and sharing the time between well-being. Where would you put it?
Where would I put it? All right, I think, obviously it's going back to, what do we honestly think is important? And once again, I think because Victoria has spent so much time in distance learning this year, it's really given us this opportunity to realise a hell of a lot of stuff we do in the currently overcrowded curriculum is really irrelevant. And it's irrelevant in the sense that, this is not going to make or break a student if they don't finish the geography curriculum at year 7.
It's funny you should mention geography. It's funny you should mention geography. That was the top of my list. Get rid of it. Utter waste of time.
Yeah. Here in Victoria, schools have got official exemptions now to not cover the curriculum because of COVID. And so we've got a way out. But what our students have developed instead, obviously, is, this ability to be totally independent with their learning, to be resilient, to sort of have to front up every day. I mean, obviously everyone's done it differently, but even working with our year 9s through the crew, that's what I've said to them. I said, it doesn't matter that you didn't finish even the science course at year 9 this year and you didn't get time in the lab. It's about how you've managed and coped with that. So, again, we've been able to build it into crew about how their skill sets have been enhanced through the experience of COVID. So, sorry, I'm starting to get a bit long-winded there, but I really do think schools have to go back to cull their curriculum. Yeah. Do we really need to do all of these subjects in the way that we're currently doing them? And I know because secondary schools are essentially based on subjects, people see that as a threat to their role. I understand that. We're getting to that time of year where you're starting to look at what can run next year and people start to worry potentially about their role and their job. However, I think we've got to make secondary school teachers, and I think at our school now we are winning this over in this idea of, well, I'm not just a geography teacher, I am actually a teacher of a human being in front of me, and what's the holistic approach to this student's education? And I think that's really key. And so then by freeing up, hopefully, some of the demands of the curriculum, we can give these sorts of programs the time they need in the curriculum. Now, I know everyone's going to be different. People might say, all right, let's collapse classes for XYZ days, and this is how we deliver it that way. Other schools might give it time. So, for example, if I do use our current structure with crew, and at year 7 and 8, we call it community. We've got it in our junior school as well. They call it circle. We're just trying to use a terminology appropriate to the age group. We've got time, in a sense, currently where we are. I'd still like to cull the curriculum, though, year 7 and 8 in particular. But do young people really need to do the number of subjects they're doing prior to their senior year, 11 and 12 years? I think
it's a really good point. I mean, I'm very biased with my own education. The school I went to, the students were asked each year what they're interested in, and a curriculum was developed around their interests, and that's how it was built. So it wasn't students being funneled into classes. It was a case of they changed, and they would put on courses, and they would coerce teachers into teaching stuff because that was where the interest lied. And funnily enough, students are often quite conservative, and English came up. People liked English, some liked maths, and so forth. But it did allow for this student-centered education. And I think part of the problem with curriculums is this weak-minded understanding of the notion of kind of equality and egalitarianism, which equates to everyone has to have exactly the same thing. And that does not lead, that standardization does not lead to equality at all. People can have equally immersive and valid experiences in education following quite different routes. They don't. Not everyone has to march through the same path through the forest to get to the other side. And I think, but unfortunately, I think that question is way bigger than kind of the scope of what we can deal with. And I don't suspect I'll get very far in pushing that kind of agenda.
I think it's coming to the curriculum. I think increasingly we're seeing globally more space happening on the curriculum. It's creeping down through the years. It would be amazing if everyone found the same spot for it. But I think it comes down to creativity. And Alice, your point around being creative about pastoral care programs, leadership programs,
Yes.
and that second point you put about getting the subject teachers to relate their curriculum to jobs. I mean, for them, I think it came up a few weeks ago with Sam from Winona. She'd managed to, use careers as a selling point for subject teachers to say, you'll be able to, if you relate it to real world opportunities, you'll get more people signing up for your subject next year. So using that self-interest. Alice, talk us through your how you managed it.
Okay, so I have been at my school for quite some time now, and it's been a process that continually evolves, and each year it's something that I reflect on, and much like us all, we aim for different goals, and I think part of it is riding that train of fitting into the school culture, trying to make careers education a part of our school culture. And I've always had the support of my principal, so I'm pretty lucky in that respect, and he's given me full reign of what I'd like to do. So I've been able to use different year levels as little guinea pigs. I've been able to get staff feedback, student feedback. And I think what I'm finding is that if I empower staff so that they are fully informed about the events that are coming up and the importance of these events, then I've got greater buy-in. So like Judy was saying, yes, we've got to be quite strategic about these things. So, I really certainly have worked a lot smarter than harder, because I used to work a lot harder in my early days as a careers practitioner. And mind you, I'm the only careers practitioner there, but I have a lot of staff working alongside me now. And when I say that, I use my year coordinators, I use our pastoral care team, and certainly our head of schools as well. So when I've got that buy-in, and I should mention the core, which are our tutor teachers. So in essence, it feels like I have an army working with me. Whereas initially it was not against, but I was flying solo. And that's taken, I guess, many times where I go in, PD the staff, jump into their classrooms, give up lunch times, invite them into certain sessions as well, make them the experts. It's been a process.
A long road, but sounds successful now. And that, so you've raised the profile and the impact and shared that understanding with everyone. Yeah.
Alice, I'm pleased you mentioned the concept of lunchtimes. I was once asked this question about how do you engage other people, and to a group of teachers, and I had the temerity to suggest, well, maybe what you do is put on things at lunchtime if you can't get in the curriculum. I lost them. That was it. Stop right there. You don't go any further. So I'm pleased to hear that strategy does work, because it sounded reasonable to me. I said, don't do it forever. I said, for the short term, do this to get it going. But even that was too much for some people.
And Judy, it's really interesting you talk about getting the business manager to sell the careers program in marketing instead of the ATAR. When was that? Because I feel now with so many headlines about the death of the ATAR and it's not all about uni, and so much more marketing from schools about the promises of lifelong learners and will prepare them for a rapidly changing world. I wonder whether that's shifted. Was that recent?
5 to 10 years ago, probably. But every year I'd say, you know what, instead of the ATAR, let's show them how amazing we are with our careers program. And they'd have open days. So no other careers advisor would go. I would go to open day to sell my product, to say, this is what we do differently. And, they'd have people doing tours, year 7s, and I'd say to the year 7s, bring the parents to me. I want to start them now. And by the time I left after 10 years, I had a program from 7 to 12, which used to be 10 and 12 only. Nearly killed me. But a few hours, lunch times, you know, going to their meetings. I got on the curriculum meeting just to be able to show them that I was interested in what they were doing and therefore reciprocate.
Yeah.
But the principal got it and she was really supportive. And then when she left, I thought, I can't spend another 10 years with another principal. I was just like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. So I moved on and went out on my own. But
Okay. Well,
I think that what they ought to do is, you've got an ATAR which is immediate, short term, and everyone loves short term outcomes, right? What they should do is stick in the census questions about the school that you went to and your occupation, and then link that data and say, if you go to this school in 5 years' time, guaranteed you'll be in jail or you'll be have a PhD or whatever it happens to be. That will focus schools on a longer term lifelong learning agenda. Again, it's kind of, you know, what gets measured gets done, you know. And if the performance statistic is a lazy one, the ATAR, lazy for universities using it, lazy for everyone else, it's a shorthand, it's irresistible. You know, it's like measuring success in terms of money. You know, it's just easy to do, but it's much harder to sort of do it in less tangible things. Measuring happiness, well, we're trying to do that, but how do you do it? You can measure a bank account quite easily. You can measure an ATAR quite easily. Get some outcomes, some proper graduate destination studies as a compulsory performance evaluation for schools, and that will really get principals' attention quickly. I'm being very coercive today. I'm in a coercive mood. It's very much stick.
I know Richard has joined. For those of you, Richard, if you're there, and on mute. For those of you who came to Greg's session, maybe session 4, where we were talking about a school that had moved to a whole school approach and had life design as a real core part of their marketing, and it was working. And he talked a lot about the amazing life coaches that he had in helping the program in years 8 and 9. I think Richard might be not here. He's logged on, but maybe not listening. Anyway, Richard is here. But St. Luke's Catholic College and their amazing Stage 4 program has been, they absolutely found space in that curriculum that they were over-delivering, and created this space and called this core subject life design. And absolutely that is a core part of their marketing. And they talk about, Greg would say he used the term new normal before everyone else started using it, and now he has to find something else. But in terms of progressive schools and a success story of someone who's got this at the center of things, has found space on the curriculum and successfully using it as a marketing tool, way stronger than ATAR or results. I was in there one day and NAPLAN results had come out like a week before, and he said, I haven't even looked at them yet. I mean, that's so powerful. I bet he had, but that's, I think that's where things are going. So it's, you know, there is space in the curriculum. I've just dropped in a note, because we're running out of time if anyone's not hanging about, for the next session. Jim has been has taken up the task to get a global mate to come and talk. Have you hooked him in yet?
No, I haven't even begun.
It'll be a surprise session. It'll be a wait and see. But
we'll
we thought the last one of term 3 will take a bit of global perspective around what's coronavirus been doing around the world, and what is it doing to careers education around the world, and just that broader lens for the end of term 3. So register there. Just reading that last comment from Francis. Convincing my principal of the importance, value of career education, student wellbeing and improving academics are the focus. Yes, we've got lots of evidence that links the doing careers education early, often and integrated with academic outcomes, wellbeing, mental health outcomes, short-term and long-term. So Francis, I'm happy to share with you. In fact, I'm going to share we try not to talk about Become in these sessions, but we do have separate sessions quite regularly where we talk about how Become can solve some of these issues. So if you want to send your principal to this one, where we talk about the evidence as well, that might help. Or you can sign up and get the recording of one if they can't make it. Hold on. we did one last week, and there's been so much interest that we're putting another one on in, I think it's the week after next. That has all the evidence, but Francis, get in touch if you want it quicker than that, because I know it's planning and budget time. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of people try and find space in that wellbeing program, because the outcomes are aligned and they go together. They support each other. Grace, your parting words, are you hopeful?
I am hopeful, because I think we've talked about the ATAR a little. If that's going to die away, or lose its importance, we do have to have a whole suite of other evidence to help these students move into the next stage of their life. So I think it's what we do in this futures education that's going to be vital in that space. And I think, now is the opportunity. I would suggest, if anyone's feeling nervous about talking to their principal, don't. Every school is ripe for a change, regardless, I think, of how well we may think we're doing something or not doing something. I think ultimately now the goalposts have shifted, and because of a very uncertain world we're living in now anyway, our students need to be best prepared for that. And the way to do it is not to worry about whether we got through the geography curriculum, but whether we got through the person curriculum, I think. And so that we can give these young people the best skill sets possible to move into that next phase of their life and to manage that.
So truly human geography, understanding the map of the self.
Yeah, I think principals will definitely be more, because they're going to be looking for something that's different. I even think young people will be a little possibly tired of the current emphasis in schools to an extent, because they've seen COVID, as we've talked about, they've highly likely seen parents become retrenched, etc. So what is the skill set I need to move me through a very unpredictable future?
Well said. I've got nothing to add to that. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us, Grace.
My
really
pleasure.
good to hear your insights. And Jim, any final words?
Oh, no, it's music to my ears. It sounds like chapter 1 of the Chaos Theory of Careers. It's no one read the book, but the virus managed to do what we couldn't in 20 years.
Oh, I've got the book.
Oh, everyone's got it.
So thank you so much, everybody.